Hi, I'm Shiv.
And I'm Chitra.
We are the co hosts of this show, Software People Stories.
We're happy to bring you stories of people associated with software as makers or consumers.
In every episode, we talk to people on their own personal and professional journeys.
Their interests and approach to work and life in a free flowing conversational format. We hope that you will be able to draw your inspiration from their experiences and insights.
These podcasts are made possible by PM Power Consulting, who have helped individuals, teams, and organizations on their delivery excellence journeys. Welcome to this episode of the Software People Stories. My colleague Sairam is in conversation with me and explains how unit card readers helped him pivot his career from being a chemistry professional to a software professional. How taking up a project that nobody else wanted to be part of as a one-man army and keeping extensive notes helped him understand the principles of agility in conversations with Craig Lagman. Applying concepts of incremental work in exploratory or R&D situations and the anti-pattern of measuring team velocity from his experience. We also talk about the concept of shared understanding and finally his advice after being in academics for a while for aspirants to the industry, particularly students. Listen on. Hi Sairam, welcome to this episode of the Software People Stories.
Hi Shiv.
I'm super excited to have this conversation for a couple of reasons. One, your background, where the last few times when we've interacted, there's always been something interesting that I've had as a takeaway. I'm sure that our listeners would also have a lot of things to learn from your own experience. And the second is that the fact that you've been working with some of the people who created some of these agile standards, like less, something that I would like to know maybe secondhand in terms of how it is to work with them. So before we get deeper, if you can introduce yourself, how you got into this profession, and then we can have the further conversation from there.
Fine, Shiv. Thank you. In fact, I have not been into computer programming as per as my fundamental qualification. I'm basically a chemistry or a chemical person, and I was specializing on photographic sciences. Then later, after working for about 3 years in the field of photography, covering all type of films like cinematography, X-rays, and so on and so forth, somewhere in 1987, that was a story by itself where I got an opportunity to fix certain problems in the then unit card readers. So that gave me a venue to explore opportunities in programming and then supporting data processing fundamentally. Then my initial days were spent in scientific programming, which I've written using Fortran 4 and Fortran 77. And then later I moved on to the enterprise resource planning, which was earlier known as manufacturing resource planning, MRP2, and so on. Mm-hmm. But whole in the life cycle, when I probably look at it, one big advantage that I had was that in most of my assignments, I stayed close with the customers. Okay. And that gave me a big strength in order to deliver exactly what they wanted from time to time, rather than taking up a big bang approach. And somewhere in 1994-95 period, I was given a project which failed almost thrice or 4 times in the past to develop an application for a logistics group of companies. And everyone was reluctant at the time to take up the project, and nobody was willing to join me as well from my team in that project. So I went all alone for almost 9 months to 11 months roughly. And could deliver the project successfully. In fact, I was the only person who was doing everything, right from analysis, design, coding, testing, deploying, supporting, and also to the extent of designing the pre-printed forms for their invoices and all this kind of stuff, working with the printers in order to get it done. A number of things like actually when you talk about a development life cycle, I would call it as a project life cycle. end to end.
Yep. It
And
looks more like a one-man army.
One-man army. One-man army. I did everything. And no, that's why it took long time, and it had several modules. And one thing interestingly, I was very satisfied with the project, and I preserved all my notes. And that is where, after 3-4 years, I had an opportunity to meet Craig Larman, one of the co-creators of Less, as you have been mentioning. And I was reflecting with him about this project. I didn't know anything about it, like Scrum or Iterative Development or XP at that point in time when I did this. Then I was sharing him step by step what I did and how the project failed earlier, and what I did, etc. One of the reasons for me to preserve this and talking to Craig Larman was that many in my organization at that point in time, after this project succeeded, started asking me, what did you do differently in order to make it as a successful project, or maybe bring it as a successful project? I didn't have an answer at that point in time because I didn't know what I did differently, to be honest with you. So I was searching for an answer to this particular question. What did I do differently in order to make this project successful? So I was seeking some help externally, someone who would help me to understand this. So that is where I came in contact with Craig Larman in one of the UML conferences, which I had to organize at that point in time. So then we spent hours together reflecting on that. And he is the one who introduced me to iterative and incremental development concepts. And he mapped everything that I did to that incremental way of developing in software. Then
Nice.
through whom I got first introduced to Scrum. I heard the word Scrum from him, from the practitioner himself at the point in time. Then he, in fact, introduced me to Ken Schauber. And then we spoke at length about extreme programming and test-driven development. So my agile journey typically started much earlier, before even understanding what that concept was. So that was the one which really made the whole thing a lot more interesting for me.
Nice.
So from then, I spent few years in academics, teaching in the universities with advanced computing and high performance computing. So that's about for 4 years, and then back to industry again. So from 2001, 2002 onwards, a lot of my time has been spent on applying these iterative and increment development principles in data-related projects. So I started spending a lot of time on that. And in my last assignment, I was heading the Agile Center of Excellence for data warehousing, business intelligence, analytics, big data, that span of things within Cognizant. So that was my last assignment. Yes.
Yeah, nice. Lots of questions. Let me try to sequence. The first is your own transition from being a chemistry professional and working in films or that kind of an industry. Was it a shock to see how software is developed from a project management, the planning, the coordination of different contributions and all that?
To be honest, it was not shocking to me. For the simple reason, until late in my career, fortunately or unfortunately, I never worked for software service organizations. My first software service organization was Cognizant. And I consciously kept myself a bit away from working for larger organizations. So therefore, when I reflect back now, I was never caught into the web of the typical the so-called software project management by service organizations. But on the other hand, I was exposed to a lot of project management on the ground, practically by various industries like chemical industries and manufacturing, engineering, manufacturing industries, and so on, where I could practically learn a number of the fundamentals of what today we call as a lean principles or Kanban or just in time and so on and so forth. So I saw them applied in the engineering industries much more fluently and effectively, which I started applying back in my software practices. Even I think I did it without my knowledge.
Okay. Yeah.
So to answer your point, Shiv, I was never had a long or an exposure or working with a typical software project management.
Okay. See, there are these two broad schools of thought when it comes to software, and whether it is even engineering, or is it science, or is it art or craftsmanship, and so on. And the other that comes from, let's say, the other industries, or this more traditional ways of specifying processes, and then once process is there, everything will work. School of thought. So since you have seen both the manufacturing industry, where there is a lot of rigor, there is a lot of repetitiveness, there can be predictive quality. What do you, and you said you also worked on more incremental approaches. So how do you reconcile the two?
In fact, when you look at even manufacturing industries, not even today, even past, I say 15 years or 20 years, there are very few industries that in turn had a strong repetitive processes. When you look at repetitive processes, one industry can have a strong repetitive processes provided that industry does not often change its product lines. But if an industry doesn't change its product line, they can no longer remain competitive. That is the other story of it. So therefore, if an industry continue to manufacture standard products, day after day, year after year, and so on, then the process could be a lot more standardized. But on the other hand, if there is say for instance, an engineering industry that is manufacturing, let me take an example of an industrial valve. And if they are manufacturing these industrial valves according to various customer specifications, then they can hardly standardize their process, because they cannot even decide what is going to be their specific components batch size in a shop floor.
Mm-hmm.
There will be a lot of variable mix and matches and so on. So they have to keep on planning and optimizing it. And it is a natural iterative way of doing things. Okay. So my point is, I will probably divide the industries, as you know very well, into two, maybe a process industries and the discrete manufacturing industries. And I worked in both. So process industries, as you said, like any other chemical or pharmaceutical, fine chemical industries, there they can actually standardize the process a bit more than engineering industry, which works on a lot of customized products.
Okay. Yeah, the other question was more on, you mentioned that you worked on data-related projects and also heading the data warehousing, business intelligence activities. There's always this confusion of applying agile or incremental approaches to something that is more exploratory, or where you don't know what the outcome is going to be. Right? So what would be your experience or advice, or have there been any stories that will help our listeners?
Can you just come again on this question, Shiv? I think I've not got this question right.
Okay. See, one question that I've also got frequently while coaching teams is that teams that are working on, Sairam, you mentioned you work in the domains of data-related projects, data warehousing, business intelligence, and so on. When I've interacted with some of the teams that have been doing more of R&D kind of work, or even in the data sciences problems, invariably they come back and say that, look, we don't know what we are doing or how we will get the answer or when we will get the answer. Or whether it is incremental, iterative, we don't know. It is just that one day suddenly we get the answer. So approaches like Scrum, where we want to time box, we want to plan things in small chunks, will not apply to us. Okay? Compared to somebody who's either doing specifications and then development, or somebody who is responding to fix some issues, etc. So what has been your experience in applying some of these agile principles and practices to areas where it is more exploratory?
Right. I will. This is a very, very good question, which I often also get, Shiv. I would like to take some time to a bit elaborate it and then answer this.
Sure.
I will go back to my initial days of software programming. I want to narrate a situation here, which I still remember fresh in my mind, and then come back to this. That is when I was writing programs in Fortran and sometimes programs in COBOL. At the time, I used to have a manager for me, and at the end of the year, as we have in organizations today, I had a performance appraisal meeting session with my boss. So typically what we do is that we take the list of works that we have done in that 6 months or 1 year, means what are all the programs that I have written and for which area, what kind of application it is and what it delivers, etc. A brief synopsis about that particular program. So I had the list with me. I went to meet my manager when my turn came. So I presented him the whole thing, which I was having in a list of, in actually a piece of paper. And after listening to me, what he did is he opened his shelf. Then he took another paper from there. Okay. Then he took my paper and against each program, he started writing a number. Say if I've written, say, for example, inventory ABC analysis. I'm just picking up an example. Then he will write a number called 87, something like that. Okay. I'm just narrating as it happened.
Yeah.
Okay. So he used to write these numbers and I didn't know what these numbers are. Okay. Then he said, fine, I don't disagree with you that you have not written this program, but this is the number of times you have compiled each of these programs. Got it?
Yeah.
Means you have compiled 87 times the ABC analysis programs. Means what? You have either there is a flaw in your understanding of requirements or your implementation. That is what is showing how well you can write a program, right? Right? It is at that time, the system used to create automatically the versions as you keep compiling the programs. The more number of times you compile, the more number of versions will be there. And later you can go and delete those versions and then retain the one that is relevant to you. All those things are there. So actually speaking, when you look at it, even a simple program development is exploratory in nature. Means we do repetitive. That is what I used to ask this question many times to even students and the new joinees in the organization, that, okay, when you would have written your first Hello World program, how many times you would have compiled it?
Right? That's an interesting way of looking at it. Yeah.
Right. So if you are listening or reading or absorbing a specification, now you have a lot of IDE tool helps today available because you don't have to remember even syntaxes today. Right? It is automatically, it is the tool itself is correcting, helping you, and so on. There are a lot of support system that is available within the development landscape itself. So this is what that typically that we may have to look at it. And software development primarily is exploratory in nature. It is not only data science, and that's what I'm coming to this point.
Okay.
Right? And we just do something, compile, see the result. Again, do something, do it. This iterative nature is built within every system. It is a natural process, right? Look at, say for example, look at a digital photography today. I just go back to my photographic field. Look at a digital photography today. In earlier days, when you have a photographic film in your camera, and if you have your photograph done, unless the film is processed and printed, you will not see the image.
Right.
Okay. And now, if someone is using a digital photography, immediately what they do is everybody come back, see the image. If the image is not good, you take another shot. Right? Which is actually an inbuilt iterative way. It is an exploratory way until you get a better picture to your satisfaction. See, earlier in film shootings, you would have seen people used to take number of takes, take 1, take 2, take 3, take 4, right? This is a common thing that everybody would have understood.
Clap.
Yes, clap. Film shooting where they will probably return the scene, take, and all those things in a blackboard. It's a small blackboard. where they would write, and the rolling film will capture that first in order to record which take it is, which shot it is, and all those kind of details. So that has been done so that after the film is being processed, then you know that, okay, this is my take number, this is my take number, etc. So you have to wait for that feedback, and now you don't have to wait. If something is not good, you can immediately go and change it. So everything that you look at it, the way we work has got an subtle internal feedback built into this. Only thing, we don't recognize it. Number one. Okay. So now if you go back to the data sciences or thing, actually Scrum is built for exploratory. It is not truly built for a predictive model. It is built for an exploratory model. And data science kind of exercises are the one which is a natural fit for Scrum than any other project. Got it? So I will go a bit more in detail here. When you look at closely about the definition of a Scrum team, the Scrum team itself is seen as a solution team and not just a technical team.
Okay.
Unfortunately, since we are converting most of our project or moving most of our projects which were traditionally done in some form or fashion into Scrum, we generally see most of the organizations keep their Scrum team as a technical team, not as a solution team.
Okay.
I will help you to understand how one can distinguish between a technical team and a Scrum team. Okay.
Okay.
Often you will also hear from many Scrum teams today in the software industry. I'm just specifically calling out a software industry, saying that I have my product backlog, but the product backlog is not detailed enough for me to understand what I have to do. Right? Or
Right.
I have my stories that are not elaborated or explained or detailed, right? And my specification is insufficient for me to start my working. So these are all the common conversational points that you may often hear in many of the software industries. If a team, which is so-called a Scrum team, is looking for a detailed product backlog item, elaborated product backlog item, if they are looking for specification, then it is a technical team.
Okay.
On the other hand, if a Scrum team is looking for a problem statement, not a specification, not a requirement, but a problem statement, then that is a solution.
Okay.
So Scrum is typically developed or created as solution team, but unfortunately, in the way we adopted Scrum, it is now a lot more seen as in many places, a pure technical team rather than a solution team. So therefore, coming back to your specific question, when you look at data sciences group, which may be developing certain statistical models and so on and so forth, they will typically get only a problem statement for them. They won't get a specification. They are the actual Scrum teams indeed. They are the one which should actually work in Scrum. It should be the other way around. You got my point?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it is completely coming out because of certain misconceptions.
Right.
Or maybe a false understanding of Scrum or Agile itself.
See, many times, probably I didn't give the full picture. The aspect that worries the teams that come up with these questions is that they are measured on their velocity.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So now probably it explains, why.
Okay.
They say that, no, look, how do I predict? I don't even know what is the size of the story or what is the efforts required to do it, etc.
Right, right. So this is another, how can I say, a problem or a limitation of applying metrics without truly understanding what it is for. Right? See,
Yeah.
usually anyone, I don't see Scrum teams alone, anyone, any organization or any department or any group will try to optimize the one that they are measured. This is quite natural, right? Even someone was telling me, if you say that in my organization everybody should be present sharp at 9 o'clock in the organization and have their in the earlier days like your card punching or anything, so everybody will optimize it, whether they work or not, that comes secondary. So what you measure they tend to optimize. All right. So actually the Scrum team should be more worried about getting their solution built rather than the velocity.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that is true. That is the problem of metric. It is not the problem of exploratory or an iterative approach. And in fact, as I said before, data sciences and analytics are a natural fit for these kind of iterative models.
Yeah, I think that probably would clarify one of the most common doubts or confusions that teams have.
Right. No, it is true also. This is one problem, Shiv. Since we are talking about this, I would like to stretch it beyond certain point. It is not only with this problem of velocity, Shiv, if you look at it. Now, what is happening in many organizations because of the proliferation of agile adoption, I would call it, people start applying the metrics left, right, center, everywhere, which is causing another sort of distortion or confusion. I will give you a classic example here. If a group is adopting Scrum, actually Scrum prescribes a very basic one, which is only your burn down, which is your release burn down and sprint burn down, which is for the team themselves to know how much work is remaining for them to finish within the time box duration. Right? Okay, now when you look at the organization applying many other metrics or measurements to the Scrum teams, for example, if an organization is trying to apply lead time is fundamentally a lean or a Kanban metric, right? Lead time or a cycle time or those kind of things. When you try to apply that to Scrum, what happens is the Scrum team will tend to adjust themselves in order to give some kind of a desirable lead time or a cycle time metric. Okay, I will tell you I'll tell you a case here. And typical Scrum team, which is working in a 2-week sprint, what it would do, it would pick up certain backlog items to start for that specific sprint, which they have forecasted, and they continue to work for that 2 week without any diversions or interruptions. And at the end of the sprint, they are going to present their work to the product owner for a review. So typically, when you look at it, a cycle time for Scrum team, which is running a 2-week sprint, the cycle time should always be 2 weeks for every story that they are working in. Because your product owner is going to review, accept or reject only at the end of the sprint during the sprint review.
Right.
Okay. So now what happens when you try to optimize the cycle time by way of measurement, they expect the product owners to come in between during the sprint. Maybe after 2 days when I'm ready, I need the product owner to accept it. After 5 days, if I'm ready, the product owner. So it completely distorts the way why that Scrum is created or sprint is created. They tend to optimize something else which is outside the scope. So that is another thing which is happening as well beyond what you said as a velocity here, right?
Okay.
For this data science teams.
Okay. The related question, probably coming maybe a complementary or a corollary question, is many teams are moving towards more of a continuous delivery or a continuous deployment model. They do that. They said whenever it is ready, I should be able to push it into production. When teams are working in that manner, and everybody keeps quoting the unicorns saying that these guys, Netflix or Amazon or all these people do so many pushes into production. So why do we need a time-boxed sprint? So do you have any suggestions for them?
No. You can have a continuous delivery or continuous push to production then sprint may not be the right one, or because sprint is for a specific, how can I say, a set of feature development or a working product development within a certain time frame, right? A continuous development comes in. See, I have seen in cases where organizations develop microservices and continuously pushing into. It's not, sometimes it's not directly into production, or maybe a pre-production or an integration environment to just see how that is working, etc. So that they can adopt in a way that they can actually continuously work, and they don't really need a sprint boundary or a time box boundary. They don't have to follow sprint over there, right? Because the workflow also, when you really look at it, the work will be flowing to the team continuously, and they generally tend to prioritize by way of the piece of work to be done, or maybe one single feature to be done. Okay. When you look at such kind of things, this is quite possible when a base product is already running in production for you, right? Because you cannot do this while you are building a product. Okay. You can do this provided an application or a system is already running in production, and there is some kind of a quick enhancements or feature additions that has to happen to that application continuously. We will be able to follow this, and you can even reduce your. I've seen some teams reducing the sprint length from 2 weeks to 1 week as a shorter one in order to do this as well.
Okay.
They do that.
Okay.
But another, just as an extension to this point, a frequent release need not be required in all the environments, Shiv. That is another thing where some teams are pressurized and suffer, where their situation may not really warrant such frequent releases. Okay. Even I have seen organization where it has got a time to market or something like that. They don't even have a test for microservices. I have seen organizations. They just push directly to the production. If it fails, then they have a mechanism of tracking it back, fixing it, and then pushing it back to the production. Because at the first attempt, if it works, that kind of an advantage they get in the market is something considerable than spending time in testing.
Okay.
And some organization does this, but again, it is dependent on the kind of application again, because you can't do it with any kind of a financial application or a banking application. This kind of a production move, which is practical to do it. So that's why we cannot generalize these practices. Probably we may have to take it as a technical possibility of continuously integrating and deploying it in production. But the frequency at which one has to do is dependent on the industry and the application. That's what I would say.
That's interesting. In fact, some time back, I was talking to a few other agile coaches, and the question came up on the various questions that come up, and I was asking, what is not the frequently asked question, but the frequently given answer by an agile coach. Okay. And the consensus was, it depends.
Okay.
Saying the primary thing is that don't take something and just try to apply it blindly. Look at your context and see what fits best.
Right. Yeah. It is again, you need to look at the business value or advantage this will provide you in your environment, is what that one has to see. And usually when you are working in an application or a product which is under regulatory environments like financial, banking, life sciences, like pharmaceuticals, then health sciences, then you cannot apply it as you apply it in a retail industry or like in an Amazon or anything of that sort, Amazon or Facebook of that sort.
Right. Okay. The last question for this episode, and I have a few more which we'll probably have more conversation later, is something that you mentioned at the start of our conversation about focusing on the customer, understanding the need of the customer.
Mhm.
Based on your experience as well as your own style of working, what are some of the common causes for misunderstanding the customer requirements?
Okay. There are so many reasons or why, or I would probably put it this way. Most of the time, what I have seen, the customers' requirements are misunderstood. I would say this way. Okay, most of the times. The reason is when a specification is given to a team, right? Okay, I will go to a fundamental statement of some of the thought leaders whom I met and we shared. The fundamental misconception that we have is that anything that is documented and given or is okay. I will rephrase it this way. We have a misconception that sharing a document is sharing of understanding. Okay, this is a misconception. Okay, all the requirement or requirement misunderstanding originates from this misconception of sharing of document is misunderstood to be sharing of understanding.
Okay.
Right? So therefore, that is why even if you look at the origin of the user stories, you probably would have seen like the 3 C's. C is the English letter C, which is card, conversation, and confirmation.
Right.
So that is why even the product backlog items, as I said, for a solution team, a product backlog item or a user story should be as short as possible, and which should be a placeholder for a conversation between the product owner and the Scrum team. It is actually a placeholder for that. And they have to converse, they have to elaborate, they have to understand, and they have to confirm their understanding back with the product owner. Okay. So that means staying close with the business or the product owner or the end user, which is what is fundamental here in order to, what can I say, design and develop any application or any system. So the fundament, and again, another biggest misconception which is leading from that documentation is that if any project or any specification is considered to be more complex, then there is a tendency of writing more pages of specification document.
Okay.
I'm not exaggerating, Shiv. You would have seen this. I'm not exaggerating. If it is a complex project, means you will have very big document, right? Right. Actually, the complexity is to be simplified, right?
Right.
It will make things more complex, right? And today, nobody reads any documents, right? Today people even don't read the mail beyond the subject line. Right? Maybe first, if you write maybe 4 or 5 sentences, people don't read today because they are overflowing with mails and so on. People don't read. So it has to be a conversation. It has to be a workshop style. It has to be a whiteboarding where the understanding is it is a shared understanding. So everybody shares that understanding.
Okay.
It's called a term, a very fantastic term. It's called shared understanding. Among the team members. So when they work, they use that shared understanding while working in that particular sprint. So
yeah, I think that is it appears simple, but I guess it has to be put into practice.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is simple, but not easy.
Okay. Right. In fact, I was reading somewhere recently that agile transformations are like avocados.
Right.
So it takes time to ripen.
Right.
And it's also probably expensive.
Right.
But definitely full of goodness and will give you a lot of benefits.
Right. Very true. Very true. Very true. And now, in order to move into this kind of a practice, we have a lot of impediments everywhere. And again, among these impediments, I see most of these impediments are invisible impediments. We don't even recognize that as an impediment.
Mm-hmm.
that is the biggest challenge here, right? So probably on some other occasion we can speak about this as well, maybe on this, impediments. And
Yeah, definitely. I can see a mini series conversations with you. So one last thing is we also try to see if our guests have any tips for people who are aspiring to get into the industry, and particularly students who work in a collegial atmosphere. As they get into organizations, what would your advice be to them?
One advice to them, because I've been both in academics as well as in the industry, so
Right, that's why this question.
Where the gap is. See, a lot of times the students have got tremendous potential, and they ideally work as an individual because they never see a collaborative development which is getting as a feature or a product or an application at the end. Mostly like they come as an individual contributor when they join in an organization. So that is where my suggestion to these college students would be that have some sort of a different clubs within your college, right? Maybe like for coding or whatever, or maybe different types of coding, apps development, and so on, where you no longer remain as an individual developer, but you collaborate with another, maybe few within that club in order to make an application ready, or work with it, so that they understand how different pieces of codes are getting integrated, how a feature is being collectively developed and deployed, or how a specification is being uniformly understood by all the members of the team. So these are all the ones that they will definitely learn in this way of working, about 4 or 5 of them together. And I have started working with few of the institutions. Because of my earlier association, there is still some kind of a link that is continuing my communication and involvement with certain of the institutions here. So where I just promote many of these open sources, like they have the GitHub and start sharing it in the GitHub, code sharing, code compiling, building together. So they understand the whole life cycle. So this is one thing which they can definitely do during their college days itself, beyond their academic curriculum. But what they may not learn in the college environment is the typical organization structure and how various departments within an organization interact. Like, for example, they may not get exposed to a HR department, or maybe a finance department, or maybe a transport department, facilities, and so on and so forth, which they can not get during the college days. So for which the intern should probably help.
Very nice. So that's all we have time for this episode. Thanks a lot, Sairam, for I think we covered a lot of ground. And these are very practical tips, as well as the abstractions that you brought in to understand iteration, or how one can approach metrics and so on, I think would be very useful.
Thanks, Shiv. Thank you.
If you like the show and would like to share your experiences with the community, or know someone else who might want to do that, please get in touch with us at podcast@pm-powerconsulting.com. That is podcast@pm-powerconsulting.com.
Please rate the show on Podchaser, Stitcher, iTunes, or any other podcast client that you find us on. Please also share our episodes with your friends and others in your network. If you or anyone you know would like to be featured on our show, do write to us at this email address: podcast@pm-powerconsulting.com.